A secret gay crush revealed on the Jenny Jones Show. And on Tuesday, the man who pulled the trigger walked out of jail a free man.
Brian Nichols, who was originally in court to be retried on a rape charge, overpowered a Fulton County deputy inside the courthouse, beat her and stole her gun, and that was the start of a deadly rampage.
Courtrooms are usually a place for legal disputes to be resolved and justice served. It is a place that determines a victim or criminal's fate. But there are times when intentions take an unexpected turn and inmates find themselves in the spotlight of a fight or brutal killings in a courtroom. Join us as we delve into the stories of 10 convicts who were killed in the room. Number 10. Brian Nichols. Brian Nichols was a man whose life was woven with threads of both promise and turmoil. Born into a world of humble beginnings, he defied the odds, rising through adversity to carve out a semblance of success. But it was a fateful day in March that would etch his name into the annals of tragic history. As a child, Brian harbored dreams of a better life, one far removed from the hardships that shadowed his early years. With an insatiable hunger for knowledge, he sought refuge in books, immersing himself in worlds far grander than his own. The library became his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the harsh realities of his surroundings and glimpse a future filled with promise. He graduated from the Cardinal Gibbons School in Baltimore, Maryland in 1989. He attended college at Kutztown University of Pennsylvania in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, for 3 semesters from 1986 to 1990. While attending college, he played linebacker on their football team. Nick Pergine, his friend who played football with Nichols at Kutztown, said Nichols' massive physical presence and martial arts skills earned him a reputation as someone to be careful around. But it was during this time he started following gangs. Berks County records show that Nichols had been arrested at least 3 times during his short stay at the university. In 1990, he was charged with terroristic threats, simple assault, disorderly conduct, and harassment, stemming from an incident in a university dining hall, according to court documents. He pleaded guilty to the 2 lesser charges, and the others were dropped. The next year, Nichols was arrested twice a month for criminal trespassing, misdemeanor criminal mischief, and disorderly conduct. Those charges were later dropped. After his brief stay at Kutztown, Nichols went to Newberry College from 1992 to 1993 and played football there. Athletic spokesman Ryan Gross said that during that time, Nichols was kicked off the football team for stealing from a dorm room. Nichols dropped out of school in 1995 and moved to Georgia. He worked for Hewlett-Packard for 8 years as a Unix systems engineer. Nichols' last employment was working as a computer engineer for a logistics subsidiary of Atlanta-based shipping giant UPS. Company spokesman Norm Black says Nichols joined the unit in March 2004 and left in September 2004, which was because he was arrested in the rape case. According to his brother, Nichols earned a 6-figure income, regularly attended church like every good Christian, and had a life going well for him. The offense that brought him to court was for the brutal assault of his former girlfriend of 8 years after their breakup. After discovering that she was dating Chris Rowell, a minister from their church, Nichols forced his way into her home, bound her with duct tape at gunpoint, and raped her. He was charged with rape, aggravated assault with intent to rape, aggravated sodomy, burglary, false imprisonment, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. In court, Nichols had told people in the courthouse, "I'm not going to go lying down," when he learned that he would be retried. Nichols' friends warned the DA's office he might try to escape, and one friend told prosecutors that Nichols planned to escape and asked him to leave a credit card in the pocket of the suit jacket he would wear to court. Even his birth mother also emailed the Fulton County Sheriff's Office to tell them she believed her son may try to take an officer's weapon. The retrial began the next week, and the tension heightened even further 2 days before the crime spree, when deputies escorting Nichols from the courthouse to his jail cell noticed something in his shoes. They found 2 sharp shanks, common jailhouse weapons fashioned out of metal, which possibly came from a door hinge. His actions prompted Judge Barnes to have a meeting, and he asked for extra security during Nichols' scheduled testimony that Friday, since the prosecution in the rape case had planned to call its last witness that day, and jury deliberations were upon him. Nichols would have to face life in prison if convicted. He knew this, and everyone knew this too. The sheriff's deputy was routinely assigned to guard Nichols during his 2 trials under Judge Barnes. She escorted Nichols to the holding area where she was to remove his handcuffs so that he could change into civilian clothes. When one cuff was released, Nichols was turned around to unhook the remaining cuff, which was dangling from his wrist. Nichols then brutally attacked the deputy, pushing her into another open cell. The video surveillance camera recorded as he overpowered the deputy, hitting her so hard in the face that her feet left the ground. He emerged from the cell with her gun belt, which included her radio and weapon magazines. Nichols retrieved her keys from the floor and locked Deputy Hall in the cell. Nichols entered another cell, changed into his street clothes, and was seen about 4 minutes later leaving the holding cell area. He used the keys to open a lockbox where he armed himself with her Beretta, 4.0 cal semi-automatic pistol. Intending to kill the judge, Nichols then crossed over to the old courthouse via a sky bridge, where he entered the private chambers of Judge Roland W. Barnes. He encountered case managers Susan Christie and Gina Clark Thomas, along with attorney David Allman. He made them all sit on the floor and held them at gunpoint while inquiring as to where Judge Barnes was. Nichols entered courtroom 8F from a door behind the judge's bench. He found Judge Barnes in the courtroom presiding over motions in a civil trial. He shot him at close range in the back of the head. Witnesses said the judge never knew Nichols was behind him. Nichols scanned the prosecution table, apparently in search of the assistant district attorneys who were prosecuting, and when he saw they were not in the courtroom, he lowered the gun and shot Julie Brandow, the court reporter, in the head. Sergeant White, who was Nichols' hostage at the time, was able to get out of the restroom and access his radio, where he put in the first radio transmission, letting responding officers know there had been shots fired. He also described the armed Nichols. Nichols then walked down from the bench and checked a side room where witnesses were held before the trial began, apparently seeking his ex-girlfriend, who was the rape victim. But she was late that day and wasn't in the room. Nichols then shot several bullets in the head of Sargent and killed him. He ran and hijacked several captives and cars on his 60 hours of freedom and total death spree before finally turning himself in. The jurors deliberated for 12 hours over 2 days before finding Nichols guilty of all 54 counts on November 7, 2008. Before the verdict was read, Bodiford sternly warned those in attendance that any emotional outburst would bring a contempt of court finding, and up to 2 days in jail. This just shows how disheartening the case was. But even so, some spectators burst into tears on hearing the verdicts read. On December 13, 2008, Nichols was sentenced to multiple life sentences with no chance of parole, and to hundreds more years on more than 50 charges. Number 9. David Paradiso. Eileen Pettit, a beautiful blonde girl, had a lovebird relationship that lasted for just a few weeks, but questioned all our understanding of love and couples' misunderstanding, as this was what life snuffed out of her. This tragedy happened one evening when Eileen, her boyfriend Paradiso David, and his mother Deborah Paradiso were on the road driving out. With Paradiso's mother driving, he and his girlfriend had a serious argument where he eventually stabbed his 20-year-old girlfriend in the neck. Then he compelled his mother to drive towards the woods, where he threw the lifeless Eileen on the roadside. After being caught, he had several trials. On one of his trials during questioning, he kept saying he killed Eileen because she deserved to die, thereby changing his previous statements. Then he decided to face the judge's corner and attack the judge with a weapon, which prompted an officer to shoot him 5 times. Deborah Paradiso said her family had been trying to alert authorities that David Paradiso was acting mentally unstable, but officials would not listen. His family sued the court for his death, stating he had some mental issues, and another measure should have been used to save the judge. But their case was dismissed because the action taken by the official was the right action. He was trained to take in case of situations like that. Some people speculate that Paradiso wanted to be shot. That's why he attacked the judge. Do you think his family was wrong to sue for this death? Number 8. Slobodan Praljak. Well, not all that glitter is truly gold. This is especially true for people who have it all and are greatly envied. The name Slobodan Praljak echoes with a unique resonance, for his story is one of audacious defiance in the face of justice. Born in '45, By 5 in Kapljina, Yugoslavia, Praljak's early years offered little hint of the infamous path he would tread. He had diplomas in engineering, philosophy, sociology, and drama, and he emerged as a polymathic figure, adept at both the sciences and the arts. He was a professor in the 70s and 80s and taught philosophy and sociology, works as a theater director, produces TV films and documentaries, and is a well-renowned business mogul who owns a huge electronics store. Yet beneath this intellectual prowess lay a complex and deeply troubled soul. Praljak joined the army in 1991. During the independence, he joined Croatia's army as wars erupted in Yugoslavia, and he was soon promoted to a major general rank. During this time, he engaged in several war crimes and turned his eyes to others he didn't order to. After the war, he went full into business, but karma caught up with him and he was sentenced to prison. His soldiers were rounding up Muslims in Prozor and committing different forms of war crimes on them. Praljak had also failed to act on information that murders were being planned, as well as attacks on members of international organizations and the destruction of the city's historic old bridge and mosques. After hearing the verdict, as the trial progressed, Praljak's demeanor oscillated between stoic composure and flashes of raw emotion. The courtroom became a stage where the sins of a nation were laid bare for the world to witness. The weight of his alleged crimes bore heavily upon him, etched into the lines of his weathered face. Behind those piercing eyes, one could discern the tortured psyche of a man wrestling with his demons. General Praljak stood and raised his hand to his mouth, tipped his head back, and appeared to swallow a glass of liquid. "I have taken poison," he said. Presiding Judge Carmela Gias immediately suspended the proceedings and an ambulance was called, but he died before getting to the hospital. Praljak's audacious act, both tragic and enigmatic, left a legacy of unanswered questions. Was it an act of remorse, an attempt to reclaim agency over his narrative, or simply a final act of defiance against a system he perceived as unjust? In his demise, Praljak became a symbol of the complexities and contradictions that define the pursuit of justice in the aftermath of conflict. His life, marked by brilliance and brutality, serves as a testament to the human capacity for both creation and destruction. In the end, Praljak's name is etched into history not merely as a war criminal, but as a man whose actions challenged the very essence of justice itself. Number 7. Klaus Grabowski. Many times we hear stories of how sad and devastated a victim's family will be after losing their loved ones to death unlawfully and painfully. But this mother took matters into her own hands. This is Marianne Bachmeier, a German woman who shot and killed Klaus Grabowski, the man who raped and murdered her daughter Anna. This incident happened in the District Court of Lübeck in 1981. Looking at Marianne's background, you wouldn't blame her for the act she took out of grief. Let's take a step back to June 3, 1950, when Marianne was born. Growing up in a poverty-stricken household was very traumatic for her. Coupled with all this, her mother abandoned her when she was a teenager and never looked back. Not too long after her mother left, she got pregnant at age 16 but had to put the child up for adoption. At 18, she got pregnant again and still put the child up for adoption because she couldn't look after herself, let alone another human. A few years later, she gave birth to her third child, Anna, and decided to keep her. To sustain herself and her daughter, she had to work in a local bar where she shared a neighborhood with Klaus Grabowski, the child murderer. Klaus Grabowski was very well known in the community and among law enforcement. He had received a probation sentence in 1973 for strangling a 6-year-old girl. In a second attack just a couple of years later, he sexually molested 2 9-year-old children. Anna was just unfortunately one of his victims. On the morning of May 5, 1980, Anna argued with her mother. She was upset and wanted to see a friend of hers, so Anna opted to skip school that day. Shortly after leaving her home pretending to go to school, Anna was lured into an apartment by a neighbor, Klaus Grabowski, a 35-year-old butcher, with a promise that she could play with his cats. Grabowski sexually assaulted Anna for several hours before strangling her with a pair of his fiancé's tights. He tied her body up using skills he had learned in his profession. Grabowski placed Anna's body in a box and buried her on the banks of the local canal in a shallow grave. When his fiancée returned home from work later that afternoon and learned what he had done, she immediately contacted the police. Investigators discovered Anna's remains and arrested Grabowski for her abduction, rape, and murder. During his trial, Grabowski had testified that 7-year-old Anna had attempted to seduce him and that he had killed her because she had threatened to tell her mother of the attack unless he gave her money. Marianne Bachmeier took personal offense at Grabowski's allegations regarding her daughter. Marianne didn't take these allegations lightly, and she shot him 8 times, leading to his instant death. Marianne was convicted of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm. She was sentenced to 6 years but released on bail after serving 3. Bachmeier moved abroad before returning to Germany prison after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She died aged 46 and was buried next to her daughter, Anna, in Bergtor Cemetery, Lübeck. This story is proof of how far a mother can go to protect her child, even if it means the child is no more. Number 6. Jonathan Schmitz. Have you ever watched the Jenny Jones TV show? If you didn't, then you certainly should. This story you are about to watch is a twist of fun and comedy that turned into manslaughter quickly. At the show, Jonathan, who was 24 years old, was invited to the Jenny Jones TV show because someone had a huge crush on him and wanted to publicly tell him. Well, like everyone would react, he blushed and was eager to know who the lady was. But his amusement turned sour really quick as Amadure Scott revealed publicly in the episode that he was the secret admirer. Schmitz calmly appreciated him and claimed that he was straight, but flattered by the revelation. 3 days later, after the show on the morning of March 9, Amadure left a sexually suggestive note on Schmitz's apartment doorstep. In response, Schmitz purchased a 12-gauge shotgun, confronted Amadure at his home, fired 2 shots into Amadure's chest, and called 1-on-1 to confess his killing. Schmitz was charged with first-degree murder and committing a felony with a firearm. To convict him of first-degree murder, prosecutors must prove that the murder was premeditated. If convicted of this charge, Schmitz faces life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The jury is allowed to consider lesser charges, such as second-degree murder or manslaughter. So, he received 25 to 50 years in prison, which he is still serving. In defense, Jenny Jones insisted that the show, which never aired, had no connection to the shooting. She contended that Schmitz was told that his admirer could be either male or female, though the defense claimed the show's producers led Schmitz to believe his secret admirer was a woman. Well, this affected the Jenny Jones show until it stopped airing on May 21, 2003. Now, it's time for today's subscriber pick. In a dimly lit courtroom, the air was thick with tension. A teenager, her face a mixture of defiance and fear, stood at the center of the room, the weight of her actions settling heavily upon her young shoulders. She had been convicted for a crime she committed, and the gravity of the moment hung in the air like a heavy fog. At the front of the room, a court official, his face contorted with anger, held a gun with unsteady hands. His voice trembled with a mixture of frustration and a thirst for retribution. The cold steel of the firearm gleamed ominously in the dim light, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The spectators sat in stunned silence, their collective breath held, unsure of how this nightmarish tableau would unfold. The judge, wide-eyed and frantic, attempted to assert control over the spiraling situation, desperately pleading for calm. The teenager's eyes met the gaze of the court official, her heart pounding like a drumbeat. In that moment, she knew that her fate hung by a thread, balanced between the jaws of justice and the brink of a potentially tragic end. Her breaths were shallow, her thoughts a whirlwind of regret, defiance, and a desperate longing for mercy. Do you think the court official pulled the trigger? Number 5. Michael Marin. Tell us, how do you run from debt or bankruptcy? Well, whatever your response may be, it shouldn't be as insane as Michael Marin. Here is a funny but tragic story of an American financier, lawyer, ex-Wall Street trader, and millionaire who died by suicide after he ingested cyanide, a poisonous substance, after being convicted of arson. Michael Marin was a man who once worked in finance, but he became known for a very strange event. Back in 2000-2009, he was found guilty of purposefully setting his own big house on fire in Arizona. He did this hoping to get money from his insurance company. This story got a lot of attention because it was so unusual. After the court said he was guilty in 2012, something shocking happened. Right there in the courtroom, people saw Michael Marin swallowing what looked like poison, something very dangerous. Even though doctors tried to help him, he couldn't be saved. He passed away right there. This made the whole situation even more mysterious and puzzling. Many questions came up and people couldn't understand why he did what he did. This story continues to be a topic of interest for those who followed the trial. It reminds us that people can sometimes do things that are hard to understand, even in important legal cases. The story of Michael Marin stays in people's minds because of its strange and unexpected ending. Number 4. William Stroer. Well, we've seen different murder cases inside the courtroom, but this old man with no criminal record tied to his name decided to take his vengeance outside the courtroom. 66 years old William Stroer shot Gerald Curry, a lawyer he had a dispute with 5 times in the neck, arms, and shoulder in 2003. A TV cameraman covering the murder with the trial of actor Robert Blake recorded the scene as Stroer fired away with 2 guns, while Curry bobbed, weaved, and crouched behind a slender tree. After the shooting, Stroer calmly pocketed his guns and walked away, saying, "That's what you get for taking my money." He was given a life imprisonment, plus a 25-year charge. We are not quite sure what the dispute was about, but many people find this verdict to be quite strict, especially for his age. Number 3. Ciel Angelao. Ciel Angelao, a member of the Tongan Crip gang, became a headline figure due to a dramatic courtroom incident that unfolded in 2014. Standing trial in a federal courthouse in Salt Lake City, Utah, Angelao's trial took a shocking turn. In a desperate bid to assert dominance, or perhaps out of sheer desperation, Angelao seized a pen and lunged toward a witness. The courtroom erupted into chaos as Angelao's actions stunned everyone present. Swift action was taken by a U.S. Marshal on duty. Faced with the imminent threat to the safety of the witness and others in the courtroom, the Marshal discharged their weapon, firing multiple rounds at Angelao. Tragically, Angelao sustained mortal injuries, and despite immediate medical attention, he succumbed to his wounds. The incident ignited a national discourse on courtroom security protocols and the appropriate use of force by law enforcement within judicial settings. Video footage of the event circulated widely, prompting both scrutiny and empathy for the difficult decisions made by officers tasked with maintaining order and safety during legal proceedings. Ciel Angelao's case stands as a vivid and somber reminder of the unpredictable and potentially dangerous environments that can exist within courtrooms. It also underscores the immense responsibility borne by law enforcement officers to ensure the well-being of all participants in legal proceedings, even in the face of grave and immediate threats. The incident remains a pivotal moment in discussions surrounding courtroom security and the challenging decisions that law enforcement officials must sometimes make in the line of duty. Number 2. Perry Manley. Earlier, we spoke about Mary Ann, who killed her child's murderer in court. Well, Perry Manley was also a parent, but his case has a different twist. He was separated from his wife and didn't want to pay child support. His wife reported him in the system and hounded him to turn over his hard-earned cash to his ex-wife. This made him angry and obsessed for over 15 years. In the end, his obsession got him killed. Manley had written and filed no fewer than 5 lawsuits and had joined others supporting the rights of fathers as non-custodial parents. Being required to pay child support for his 3 children, Manley claimed it was a form of involuntary servitude, where a man is forced to work to support a child he is not responsible for raising. Even with all this noise and actions showed, he kept getting increasingly bitter by the day. Manley, dressed in camouflage and carrying a backpack strapped across his chest, walked into the courthouse and tried to avoid the metal detectors, but an officer noticed the grenade in his hand and notified other officials. Security officers summoned police and spent more than 20 minutes trying to persuade him to surrender. He placed papers he wanted to present to a judge on the floor and used both hands to cup the grenade to his body. Then he made a furtive movement with the grenade, which led to 2 shots being fired at him immediately. When the officer ran to his body, they noticed holes at the bottom of his body, meaning the grenade was inactive and he had no sort of weapon on him. What a sad way to die. Number 1. Clerimi Fazzo. And last on our list is Clerimi Fazzo, a 40-year-old Albanian man who opened fire in an Italian courtroom, killing his estranged wife and killing her uncle, before being killed himself by armed police. This case was rather unfortunate, as the Italian courtroom is a heavily guarded place of X-ray scans and metal detector machines. Witnesses said Fazzo began arguing violently with her relatives before shooting her and her uncle. The drama happened at just after 11 a.m. local time. Following the shootout, a fleet of ambulances arrived at the scene to deal with the casualties. Fazzo managed to run out of the building and shot and wounded his wife's lawyer, Giovanna Fava, as well as another lawyer and a guard before being shot dead by armed police. We have no intel on exactly what caused their misunderstanding, but we are sure that their 2 children will be scarred for life. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.